This time we'll look at one of the most momentous functions in Excel, the PMT or payment function. Its job is to help one figure out what the payments will be on a loan, like a house loan or a car loan, where all the payments are the same amount over the life of the loan. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it looks. A friend of mine named Alex once used this payment function on his laptop to catch a cheating new car salesman. The salesman was trying to trick Alex into making payments that were much too large on the minivan he was buying. Alex saved thousands of dollars using PMT. You see, Excel can definitely be your friend. To handle the payment function properly, you need to know just a little bit of simple math. You know that a year has 12 months, so a loan that's paid monthly requires 12 payments per year. A loan paid quarterly requires 4 payments per year. An annual percentage rate is split into 12 parts for a loan paid monthly and 4 parts for a loan paid quarterly. That's the kind of thinking you need to master the PMT function. The PMT function has 3 required arguments. There are also 2 optional arguments you can see in brackets, but we'll ignore them here. One PMT argument is the rate. The rate is not the APR. Instead, it's the APR divided by the number of periods in a year. It is the chunk of the annual percentage rate paid during each individual payment. That's why for the loan we're going to work with, we have to divide the APR by 12. 1/12 of the APR is paid during each of the 12 months. If the loan were semi-annual, we would divide by 2 instead of 12. Another of the payments functions is NPER, which stands for the number of periods. It really means how many payments will be made over the entire life of the loan. We get the answer with simple math, and we have Excel do the math for us. If the loan is paid monthly, that's 12 times a year, and if the loan stretches over 30 years, then the NPER is 12 times 30. Even though you can do this math in your head, it's better to force Excel to do the work. Finally, the PV, or present value, is the amount of money that's being borrowed. Let's look at a typical loan payment problem statement. One must have all of this information to work out a loan payment. This means that we must know these things. What's the annual period of the loan? This means how many times per year a payment must be made. For this loan, we can see that payments are monthly, so there are 12 annual periods. What's the total time of the loan? For this loan, it's 30 years. Another thing we have to know is the APR, the annual percentage rate. If the loan officer or the TV advertisement or newspaper advertisement quotes you an interest rate and it's not explicitly stated as the annual percentage rate, insist on finding out what the annual percentage rate is. For this loan, it's 4.5%. You cannot compute the loan without knowing the APR. Other interest rates are practically meaningless. You also need to know the present value of the loan. That's the amount you're actually borrowing, and in this case it's $140,500. Let's look at the entire homework sheet that I have devised to help explain the arguments. I'll fill in the APR from the problem statement. It's 4.5%. You'll notice that as I fill in column B, I've already formatted most of the cells to reflect the proper formats. It's not important that these cells be formatted in any way. I'm just doing it to make it easier to follow. This is a 30-year loan, so I'll fill that in next. Now I'll input the annual periods. This loan is to be paid monthly, so there are 12 annual periods. Next, we'll compute the rate argument. As mentioned before, it's the APR divided by the number of annual periods. I'll use cell addresses to compute it here. I've had my computer display 4 digits past the decimal point, but again, the actual display, the formatting, is not important. Now, the NPER argument. Since it's the total number of payments over the life of the loan, I'll use Excel Math to multiply the number of annual periods times the years in the loan. $360 total periods in the loan. The principal is the amount that's being borrowed, or present value, and I'll just type that in directly. Okay, we're ready to invoke the payment function. One way to do this is to begin typing it in, then asking the computer for a little help. Let's do it this way first. So I'll first type equals PMT open parenthesis. This tells the computer that I want to work with the payment function. Next, I'll click on the Insert Function button to the left of the formula bar. It looks like f of x or f sub x. This brings up the function arguments dialog box. In this case, we'll use the pre-computed cells to fill in the arguments. I'm going to move the function arguments dialog box a little bit out of the way so we can see what we're doing. I'm now in the rate box. I'm going to click on cell B7, which has the APR divided by annual periods. I will tell you that the most common error people make when computing the PMT function is instead of clicking on the APR divided by annual periods, like I just did, they'll click on the annual percentage rate, or 4.5%. That would produce an astronomically high payment amount. So this is the big trick. You make sure that you input the annual percentage rate divided by the number of annual periods. Next, I'll go to the total number of periods over the life of the loan, and I have that in cell B8. The final required argument is the present value, which I have in cell B9. The other two arguments, future value and type, are optional, and we are not going to mess with them. So I'm going to click OK and watch the PMT function do its work. Here we have it. The payment on this loan, 30-year loan, 4.5%, $140,500, is $711.89. That is the payment function in action. This payment function shows up as a negative number. In accounting format, parentheses around a number and the number appearing in red imply that it's a negative number. There are two major ways, to change this so it reads as a positive number. One of them is to go into the actual syntax of the payment function. I'll do this up here on the formula bar, and just put a minus sign before the P of PMT, and then insert. We now have a positive number for the payment. Another alternative, to get this alternative, I need to get rid of my minus sign here first, is to insert the principal or present value as a negative number. One way to do that is to type it in as minus B9, which I'm going to do, and again we have a positive result. This final time, we're going to do the payment function like a real Excel hotshot power user who already knows what the arguments are. We're not going to use cell addresses. We're just going to type everything straight into the payment function. So I will click on cell B11 and invoke the payment function equals PMT open parentheses. Look here. The computer is showing us the arguments. We're not going to do the bracketed optional arguments. It's telling me the first one I need is the rate. So I'm going to type it in directly without relying on any cell addresses. So here we go. The rate is 4.5% divided by 12. 0.045 divided by 12. Now I'm going to type in a comma. Watch what happens down here with the prompt when I type in the comma. It changed, so the bold is NPER, the number of periods. Well, that's going to be 30 years times 12 months at a time. A comma again, and now we need the present value, 140500, making sure you don't type a comma in. If you put a comma in, the computer would think you're going to the next argument. And I need to close it with close parenthesis. Now I have typed the stuff in directly instead of using the cell references, and let's see what we get. Again, $711.89. If you look up in the formula bar, you can see we had Excel do the math directly as the arguments without relying on any of the cell references. This is the hotshot way to go. In this presentation, we have been ignoring the PMT function's last two arguments, which are optional. Most Excel courses do not cover these arguments. Just for completion's sake, I will describe their uses for you briefly. If you're already feeling a little overwhelmed, just kick back. I won't be describing this very thoroughly, and most instructors won't expect you to know this part of the function. If you're my student, you certainly won't need to know it. The FV, or future value argument, represents the amount one may want to leave remaining in an account after the final payment is made. It's sometimes used as a savings goal. In this case, the present value is input as 0, and the PMT function can determine how much one must save each period, like each month, to reach a savings goal. There is another Excel function called FV, or future value, that handles this more directly. The type argument tells the PMT function whether payments will be made at the end of each period, that's the default value, which could be entered as 0, or if they'll be made at the beginning of each period, where one would enter a numeral 1. These two options produce slightly different results. Now you have the whole story.